Welcome to the Leadership in Law podcast with host Marilyn Jenkins. Cut through the noise, get actionable insights and inspiring stories delivered straight to your ears. Your ultimate podcast for navigating the ever-changing world of law firm ownership. In each episode, we dive deep into the critical topics that matter most to you, from unlocking explosive growth to building a thriving team. We connect you with successful firm leaders and industry experts who share their proven strategies and hard-won wisdom. So, whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting your journey as a law firm owner, the Leadership in Law podcast is here to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to build a successful and fulfilling legal practice.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership in Law podcast. I'm your host, Marilyn Jenkins. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Mitchell Beinhaker, to the show today. Mitchell is a business lawyer and estates attorney who runs a solo legal and consulting practice representing business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and professionals. Through his 28 years of experience, Mitchell has handled business development, marketing, firm management, along with business transactional work for clients of the firm. He has extensive experience with corporate governance, commercial transactions, real estate, and risk analysis. Using his years of practical experience, he drafts contracts, negotiates purchases, and can manage outside counsel for any corporate situation. For business owners and executives, he creates and implements estate plans along with succession plans to help companies continue for future generations. Co-author of 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone, The Small Business Owner's Guide to Staying Out of Court. It's available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, and the Audible version is coming soon. I'm excited to have you here, Mitch. Welcome.
Thanks, Marilyn. I appreciate it. Let's update a couple things. I realized I am 32 years practicing.
All right.
And since I've sent that to you, the book is available in Audible.
Fantastic. All right.
Amazon. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you got started, and then I want to dive into that book. Sounds interesting.
How I got started with law? Yeah. So I've always been around. I've always been more entrepreneurial, all my life growing up. But my dad was in insurance sales, so he was always independent type of guy. And so when I came out of law school, because you got to do that first, obviously, then, I worked for some firms. I worked for some different people, but it was always kind of like doing my own thing. I was in corporate for a while. And because of my contacts in the insurance and financial industry, all the business planning that I do and estate work and stuff, it kind of fit with, a natural market. And I like doing that kind of work. So, I guess by 2001 something, I really started out on my own, kind of like in-house somewhere and a side practice. And then the practice grew. And then I left the company because I was just too busy with my side work and, just grew from there. And then in 2019, I think, that's when I really broke up my firm, left my partners. I basically run a virtual practice now. I have a couple of support people, but they're all virtual. And, lean, mean, very few cabinet space anymore. It's all, paperless for the most part.
Oh, fantastic. But by always having the entrepreneurial drive, you knew eventually you would be working on your own, yeah?
Yeah, I just have trouble working for other people. When I lived in Columbus for a couple of years with my wife. I worked at Nationwide in their advanced planning, department. And corporate was like difficult for me. I've always been kind of a rebel that way. Even growing up in high school and college, I always had jobs that like businesses I would start. I wouldn't like work for somebody. I mean, I used to bartend and do different things, but in terms of like getting a job in the summertime, all my friends would get jobs working at companies, not me. I was out detailing cars or, starting another business or whatever I was doing. It just can't sit still. I don't know.
No, I love that. I've always been the same way. I don't like working for people. I like to do things done and do things and just, make my own destiny, I guess.
Yeah, right. And you have control of your role. And, look, there's upsides and a lot of down. None of my friends like that. They didn't like the freedom of worrying about where the next piece of business comes from. I've just gotten used to that after 32 years of practice,
That's true. That is the stress that goes along with that. So you help, it sounds like, everything from starting a business to M&As or succession planning. Now, with all that comes along, like, let's talk about your book, How to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone. And I know it's so easy to get involved in litigation in the States.
Right. Well, that's kind of where the book came from. So I co-authored it with a friend of mine who's a publicist, and he was bugging me to write a book. You got to write a book. And so it was very painful. Without him, I probably would have never gotten it done. But, it's a guide. It's not a story. It's a guide for people to use to do the things that they need to do to run their businesses and stay out of trouble. Because that's what I do. Like I don't litigate, but I do correct things. So I'm brought in all the time because people's businesses are failing. They need to get out of their lease. They need to get out of their equipment leases, deal with vendor, whatever the issues are. And then I find out, they don't have a business plan. They haven't been using like fundamentals. They don't have an agreement with their partner who they're now breaking up with, and there's nothing in writing. So a lot of the book was about that. And I also interviewed a lot of other attorneys who do things that kind of like, around the periphery of business work. They're a commercial litigator. They're a divorce attorney. They deal with employment law. Some of that I do and I don't do, but I don't litigate and stuff like that. So it was kind of an opportunity to also interview those people and say, hey, if my client comes to you and has this problem, what should they know about, dealing with it and staying out of trouble and, things like that. So, yeah.
And that would definitely be a great book for any business owners. We'll definitely include links to that in the show notes.
Have on your shelf. So when you screw something up, you can look back and see what you were supposed to do, I guess, afterward.
Exactly. Now, when you're putting together a business plan or helping a business do their business plan, are you looking future about not being sued whenever you're putting that business plan together?
Well, I mean, as a lawyer, yeah, that's always my kind of focus. If I'm putting contracts together for them or working on a partnership agreement or whatever, the part of the agreement that's always missing when a non-lawyer, when a lay person does it, even lawyers. I have friends that have gone to law school and they're not practicing lawyers and they're trying to do these agreements with their partner themselves. They always leave out the part, how do you resolve disputes? What happens if things break down and a contract is then not really worth much if it only works when things are good? Then you don't really need a contract. Everybody's on the same page. So, that's usually the issue. So, I'm always looking at how do you protect your assets, how you're structured right so you don't get sued? What are the rules you got to follow? How can you make it reasonable so there's not too much onerous, rules on the owner? Because a lot of people don't follow the rules. They try, but they don't do it, for a living. So, and then your contracts, like, things break down. Like you'll have disputes with your partner and you'll have disputes with vendors and customers and whatever. What do you put in place to deal with those things,
So when you're thinking about taking on a partner, obviously you want to, plan the exit or some sort of resolution while everybody's happy.
Right, correct.
Because you don't want to talk about it at the end because it'll never balance out.
Right.
What are the things that you specify and put in that type of contract to envision the future?
Yeah. So there's probably two agreements that, anybody in business with a partner or more should have, right? They should have some sort of an operating agreement or bylaws or something like that kind of says, okay, this is what I do. This is what you do. This is my responsibility. This is your responsibility. This is how I can bind the company and you can bind the company, things we have to vote on, things we have to agree on, things we don't have to agree on, all those types of things. So those are often missing, all the rules. They have day-to-day operations, but they have nothing in writing or it's very loose. And they have to keep up with that. It's not just you just write it once and just walk away, right? The other part is something called a buy-sell agreement, which is an agreement. Now, there are parts of a buy-sell agreement in your general operating documents, but for the most part, they don't address issues like if you die, if you become disabled, if you're getting sued by someone else, how does that affect the business? Or if you just want to walk away at some point, you're like, listen, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this. How do we break up? And so that second agreement really has to be put in place, maybe not from day one, but certainly within the first, 6 to 12 months, once you see that the business is viable, and deal with those issues if you want to walk away or if you have to walk away or if you can't physically work or you die, you got to deal with now this person's family. What do you have in writing to protect yourself? So all those issues need to be addressed ahead of time because I have more crazy situations where they weren't. And, it comes down to who has more money and who has more leverage. And that's not a position you really want to be in. So.
No, but that's true. It's like money changes people. Having that set what you want while you're both in a good place is the best way, or one or two or however many partners there are.
Yeah.
And you were saying to just never go with your gut. So when you're talking about, like, we talked about these contracts and we just write, basically what we're expecting. This is what we plan on doing, but we don't cover all the bases. What would you suggest as far as not following your gut? In what instance does that work better for you?
Yeah, well, I think people think they call me, they go, my partner's doing this and that. They can't do that, right? I mean, that's illegal. So there's no penal code that deals with business situations. You don't go to jail for breaching a contract with your partner. The question is there damage, and what's the damage, and is it quantifiable, and do you have anything in writing, and so forth. So you really can't do things on a handshake. I mean, people do it, but it's a really dangerous way, to do business because you don't have any rules. Like there's some situations where, I'll give an example. When you have disputes, you could go to arbitration or mediation. Now some attorneys don't like arbitration. I'm partial to it. I think it's fine. Some businesses lend themselves to a scenario where you want to use arbitration because you want it to be private. You don't want it to be out in the public, right? And where do you bring a lawsuit, and how do you, so all those types of rules, that there's not some book that says, okay, well, go to chapter 17 now that you're having an argument with your partner, and these are the rules. Like you have to make them yourself, right? So that's the problem with kind of doing things on a handshake, on a, that you trust the other person. And I'm not suggesting that people are not trustworthy. Let's go on the assumption that they are trustworthy, but people remember things differently. Part of the book, I talk about memory. I interviewed a memory expert about how people remember things. And, generally we remember things completely different. And it doesn't matter. We went through the same, situation, but we remember it differently because our minds aren't organized like, very few people have, photographic memories, and everything's organized in their head. They can just pull it out of the folder and look. Our minds are like boxes of stuff with a lot of sticky notes in it. The sticky notes are stuck to the wrong things. My sticky notes are stuck to certain things because I have personal experiences. Yours are stuck to other things because you have personal things going on in your head. And we both swear that we were at this place doing this. And you're like, no, I was in Chicago. I know, because I was with my friend Susie, and you were with, and I'm like, are you sure? And, you find out you're both wrong. And that's common. It's very common. So when you operate a business, if you're going to do it for profit, not for fun, and it's, you're risking money and you're risking your time and all that kind of stuff. We're all adults. You need to do what adults do, or what they should do, right? So you have to put things in writing, and you have to have the rules written down so you and I don't have to worry about what's going to happen with our memories. What are we going to remember wrong? What are we going to be sure of? Where you're like adamant, Mitch, I know that's what we discussed because of these 3 reasons. And I'm like, well, I know that's not true, Marilyn, because of these 3 reasons. And we won't agree. And it's not that you're right or I'm wrong. We just, we're attached to whatever's going on in our head. So that's the big problem with business.
I like the idea. I like what you said about our Post-it notes are connected because of to different things because of our experiences.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense. So again, preparing for the exit in the beginning when everybody's on the same page is definitely the best way to do it. And I think nowadays that we are more things are virtual. I think it's even more important because you're not sharing an office with that person. So if you are running a virtual firm, making sure you have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted so that you're both on the same page if you're not going to be working in the same location. Do you think that's even more important?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And a lot of people say, even attorneys, they're like, call me, let's talk about this. I go, no, I want to put it on email, not because I'm difficult, but because then I have things in writing that show our discussion, and I can save it, and I can go back to it and refer to it and say, you know what, I'm not sure what Marilyn and I talked about. Let me check. Now, I may not remember it that way, but if I have it written down, I'll be like, well, I guess that's what happened. I guess that we agreed to, and you'll stick with it. And even if you do have to go to court because somebody's being difficult, you have something to submit to the court and say, well, Your Honor, this is what we decided on this date. She sent me an email that this, I responded back. Here we are.
And I keep almost all of my email. It's, anything related to business. I'm just not one to delete stuff like that.
Keep paying for data, keeps going up. But that's, but I will make a comment though, because I do get people that call me and they say, oh, well, we don't have a contract, but we get texts going back and forth or whatever. That's really a contract, right? Well, the general answer is no, that's not a contract. And the reason it's not a contract is it is evidence that the 2 parties had dealings together, right? It's evidence that you agreed on something. Okay. The problem is that it doesn't negate or exclude like oral discussions, right? So the other party says, Mitch, I know we put that in writing, but don't you remember the conversation we had 2 weeks after that we talked about this, and this? Well, there's no agreement that says, listen, this is our final agreement, and anything, if there's changes, we got to put it in writing or it doesn't count. It doesn't say that. So then you have all those peripheral things for people to bring up. So yeah, so don't think that your text chain is magically a contract. It's evidence of a contract, but it doesn't create a contract. So a lot of people do that and they come back to me. Well, I have all the texts, I have all the emails. Okay, that's a start, but it doesn't mean that the other person's not going to say, well, don't you remember we had this conversation? Here's on my calendar when we spoke on this date and you told me this, and this. You're like, and maybe you're not even sure,
Yeah.
So it creates problems. It does.
Again, the memory thing again. Yeah, that makes sense. Because a lot of times we think, or I've heard of people talking about, yep, it's in text, so we've got an agreement.
No way. No way, because it's always open to questioning and reliability. And just because you have it in writing there doesn't mean you didn't talk about something else before, or there was something else that you agreed to that wasn't just in the text. It just doesn't solve that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it gets,
I agree.
I talk about it in the book. I think I talk about it in the book. You remember there was a time Brian Williams was on, he's back on the news, but he was emasculated for this. He was on some show. It might've been David Letterman. It might've been, the Tonight Show, whatever. And he talked about this experience he had during one of the Gulf Wars, covering something. His helicopter was shot down and this and that. And the pilot calls up later on and says, he wasn't even on the helicopter with us. He was on another helicopter. It was not shot down. It wasn't that day and this and that. He looked stupid. I think it was actually Today's Show. And he didn't even, and instead of him saying, well, I must have remembered it wrong, he apologized for lying, which I'm sure he didn't lie. He just remembered it wrong. It later turned out, by the way, the pilot was wrong too. He didn't remember something correctly either. But, if he would just admit to the fact that, our minds are not perfect and I just screwed up, then, people would have been treated him differently. But that was a situation where it was such a traumatic, experience. His mind was sure that we were shot down and this and that. Now, maybe he had heard it so many times, he'd experienced other things and they kind of melded together. And then he was sure that this happened, whatever. And that's what happens. That's how it works, So don't leave it to chance that your business is not going to have problems, because it will. And don't leave it to chance that things will just work out when you're arguing with your partner. And maybe you're right, but they have more money or whatever. And then you're stuck.
Yes. Very good. I agree with that. And what are the 4 main things that we should, so thinking about, the beginning and then the end of a business, whether that's going to be an M&A or a sale or whatever,
right.
What are the 4 things that you want to make sure everyone includes in their business plan?
What's your plan to grow your law firm's sales and profits in 2025? My name is Marilyn Jenkins, and I want to take a quick moment to share something I'm super excited about. It's called the Law Firm Growth Guild. It's your shortcut to mastering marketing and getting more clients. It's sponsored by Law Marketing Zone. If you're a lawyer or a law firm owner who's been feeling overwhelmed, juggling clients, leading your team, and trying to scale without losing your sanity, I get it. It's a lot. That's exactly why I created this online membership community. I've been working with law firms since 2018, and I've worked with and helped hundreds of firms across the U.S. and Canada to grow and scale their firms beyond where they had ever been before. The Law Firm Growth Guild is designed to help you understand marketing strategies and grow your firm smarter and to scale your firm predictably. And here's the best part. It's only a fraction of the price of a cup of coffee daily. My team and I are adding new content weekly, and you can be intentional about your growth and development each week. All of our webinars and workshops are in the community, and a first good workshop is all about setting your vision for your strategy for 2025. We've got workbooks, spreadsheets, and everything to walk you through setting up your marketing plan for 2025. Getting crystal clear on where you're going and how to get there. Imagine walking into this new year with confidence, with a plan, and with the tools to make 2025 into your best year yet. Don't get left behind. Join the community now and jumpstart your growth for 2025 and beyond. Click the link in the show notes or visit checkout.lawmarketingzone.com to find out more and to join the community. Let's grow your firm together. I can't wait to see you on the inside of the Law Firm Growth Guild.
Yes. So, and if you look at these templates from SCORE or from any of the other, SBA, they're usually like 10 to 12 sections if you break down a business plan for all these different sections. But to me, there's like four main categories, right? One is a detail of your product or service, right? What are you offering through your business, your service, your products, whatever it happens to be, right? And get that as detailed as you can. It's going to change, obviously. The second part is the personnel part of it. And I think a lot of people don't explore the issue of, maybe there's some things that I can't do. Like, this is a great business idea, but I don't have all the skills to do this. And how am I going to get them? And are they affordable? And do I know somebody can help me? And so forth. So that's the people side of it. Then there's obviously the marketing of it. How am I going to market and promote this business? How am I going to develop business? And I mean, even part of that is there even a marketplace for this business? I have so many people that have great ideas, but nobody cares. It just, they have this great solution to this or that. And they find out, like nobody wants to pay for it. To you and me, it doesn't make any sense, but that's just the way people are. So you have to kind of explore those things ahead of time. And that's usually where like the rubber meets the road. People don't do the marketing research up front. They don't ask the question enough to clients and customers. Will you buy this? What will keep you from buying this? What do you like about it? What you don't like about it? The best business owners that I've met, that have been my clients, that I've interviewed on my podcast, are ones that are constantly asking these questions of their customers. Constantly. They're never comfortable with the fact that they think what the customer wants is correct. And my best clients and business owners know that what they think is wrong 9 times out of 10. So whatever the reason is that your customer's buying your product or service, you're probably wrong as to the reason. Part of it may be true, but if you go with that and just like you said, go with your gut and say, oh, I believe that, you're probably going to fall flat on your face when something changes in the marketplace and you're not aware of some, algorithm on Google or something in the marketplace in the industry or, whatever. And then the fourth thing, which nobody wants to ever deal with, is your finances. What do your pro forma finances look like? What is your actual revenue expecting? What are your real expenses for running this business? It's not just cost of goods sold. It's also, having a staff and having people working for you. If the business doesn't work unless you work for free, then it's not a viable business, obviously, right? Because then you can't pass it on to someone else. Nobody wants to work for it. So those 4 areas, you got product or service, you got people, marketplace, marketing, and financials. Those are 4. If you do those 4, that's a good start. You can keep going from there and start by, expanding on them as time goes on.
That certainly makes it more approachable. I like that. One of the things when you talk about the marketing and what you think someone is going to do, like the algorithm change, obviously another one just happened on Google.
Yeah.
When we're doing marketing for clients, we're like, okay, what keyword do you think people are typing in to find you? Then we find out what they're actually doing. And they're typically different.
Right.
So if you're doing your own SEO, that sort of thing, and you're doing it without research or without really looking at the market, you're going after the wrong words.
Right.
So where do your lead flow is
Right.
not good.
Right.
Yeah,
and even if you're going after the right words, you don't even know if they're right. It's just total random. You have no way to test it. Yeah, exactly. People don't test. That's a big problem. But if they start with those 4, core areas, it's a good start to have something that's digestible, to put things on paper, not be overwhelmed, and can start by using some decent principles to develop their business, whether it's viable or not. Like, make your mistakes before you lose all your money and bought 10,000 units and they're in your garage. Like, that's something you want to avoid, right? And I know business owners that have done that.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I have known those as well. Now, in those 4 steps, you're not putting anything as far as your exit plan. So your exit plan being a partnership or whatever, would that be obviously the exit plan is going to be in that contract. Where does estate planning for business owners come into? Is that completely separate if we're talking partners?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's separate. It's definitely, especially if you have a family and, and people that rely on you, it's definitely a part of that. I think that at the beginning, you want to make sure, your wills and your healthcare directives and your powers of attorney, things like that are firmed up. Especially if you have young children or whatever, as you do your partnership agreement, make sure they're coordinated, because there's some rules that can run awry if you don't do things properly. But in terms of exit strategy, I don't know if I would do that at the beginning, but I would do this. If you keep that in mind when you start the business, right, you're going to make different decisions than if you run a business that's a lifestyle business that you don't plan on exiting or selling or anything like that. So, if it's a lifestyle business, you want to minimize your taxes, you want to maximize your cash flows, you want to, live as best you can and pay your bills and so forth. But on the books, on paper, it may not look like a valuable business.
Mhm.
But if you have an exit strategy in mind, you want to sell it someday, you want somebody to take it over, you're going to want to pay some taxes and show some profits and, have viable books that show that the business has viability, so they can, so somebody will put a value on your business, say, oh yeah, no, I'd buy that, 4 times earnings or whatever. But if you're managing your business to reduce your taxes, show no profits, then it's not worth anything.
That's right.
So yeah. And then as you develop and the business gets better, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, now you're like, hey, this actually may be a business. Then maybe you want to start putting some plans in place, because it takes 5 to 10 years to, really get prepared to exit, sell, whatever.
It is a long process. I was just talking to someone the other day that it took almost a year for the process to complete.
Yeah. And that's working pretty hard. And that's just the sale, you mean, right?
Yeah. That's
Just getting prepared could take you a couple of years if you haven't been keeping it in mind.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things some coaching groups I know are telling people at the beginning, these things need to be in place. Otherwise, you're going to be scrambling to make them,
Yeah,
to get the reports together. So being
definitely.
prepared, whatever you see, if it's not a lifestyle business, whatever you see, having that in place so that you can easily step aside.
Right. Exactly. Because then what's happened is you bring a business broker in to help you sell the business, and they start looking at your books and trying to add things back in to create profits, to say, oh, well, he's been paying for his whole family through the business, cars and phones. You won't be paying for that when you buy the business. So they call it magic math. So now all of a sudden there's profits when you didn't show before. And, can you rely on that? Can you not? I don't know. Due diligence becomes more difficult because it's not like little businesses aren't audited. They don't have audited financials. So you have to rely on the books and records that this person's providing you. And more often than not, they're wrong. Not necessarily purposefully, but usually they're wrong. And you start out the business, you're like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Why are we making any money? And you discover that their books were a little off,
Yeah. I mean, hiring a bookkeeper is not an incredible expense, and it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You got to keep your books clean. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know that we're coming to the end here. I don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been great information about the business plan and contracts and such. What would be the one thing that you would want our listeners to take away from this episode of what they should or should not be doing?
Well, we talked about a lot of stuff, right? Writing a business plan, contracts, but an overall thing, put things in writing. Like, do not be afraid to have a contract with your customer. If you're a supermarket, obviously you can't sign a contract with every customer that's going through the checkout counter. That's a different business model. But if you are dealing with people where they're hiring you to do work on an ongoing basis or a project basis, you have to have things in writing. Some industries require it, but if you don't have it in writing, you're going to run into trouble. And I've had people say to me, oh, I'm dealing with a customer. It's so like, how do I just whip out a contract? I go, well, if you look at it that way, right, you're not going to be comfortable at all. But adults do things like that. Like the court's not going to say, oh, well, Mitch, I mean, I understand you were uncomfortable. You didn't want to show a contract, so therefore you don't have a contract. We'll let that go. It doesn't work that way.
No.
They're going to say, well, did you have a contract? No. Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you. Responsible adults do responsible things. You have to work it into your repertoire as to, a lawyer, I have to use retainer letters, right? So I'll say to you, okay, well, let me send you a memo and I'll send you the information I need. Then I'll send you a retainer letter. You'll sign that retainer letter, pay me a retainer, and then we'll get started on the work. Or maybe I'm missing some information. But other industries, they're kind of like you said, they're kind of like, go with your gut, shake the hand, loosey-goosey, and runs into problems. So put things in writing, make it a habit of what you do. Business plans, vendors, contracts, customers, whoever you're dealing with, partners, definitely.
I agree. When it comes to contracts, whenever you send a potential client a contract, if they refuse to sign it and they ghost you, then you understand the type of person you're talking.
It's a weed check. It's
exactly. And you can say, I was lucky not to.
They don't sign it. I go, well, don't you want to know that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's disappointing if you're in a growth mode and you're thinking this person's a great fit and then they show their true colors. You just have to go, okay, I dodged a bullet on that one.
Right. Exactly. You didn't go 12 months down the road and then found out that they were just, milking you for ideas or whatever it was and had no intention of really, moving forward. I've had more clients are raising capital, for example. They get somebody, they're committed. I'm in for 250, whatever. Okay. When you finally get to the pay, okay, here you go. Sign here, send over the money. Everything stops. Well, I'm not sure that people are big talkers until they got to sign something. So yeah, I want to know that as early as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to know if I'm wasting my time, but
yeah, you've got to build rapport with people, but don't spend a year and a half building rapport. Find out up front if you're willing to go to ink. You are, so why shouldn't they be, right?
Agree. Absolutely. Cards on the table. Well, this has been really good. I want to make sure that we have the links, everything, the show notes for your books and your information.
Yep.
Where can our listeners reach out to you and connect with you?
So the law practice is beinhakerlaw.com. Beinhaker's Haker, no C. And I also have mitchbeinhaker.com, which is where you can find the podcast, the book. There's a couple of ebooks on there. All of we'll put a link to this probably. I try to keep the videos up on that one too. And also I have a LinkedIn profile. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think my VA puts stuff, I believe, on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. So you can find me on most of the platforms.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, you can connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take the next step with a digital strategist to help you grow your law firm, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to lawmarketingzone.com to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, thanks for listening to Leadership in Law Podcast, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Leadership in Law Podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of law firm owners out there facing similar challenges and striving for the same success. Head over to our website at lawmarketingzone.com. From there, connect with other listeners, access valuable resources, and stay up to date on the latest episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep leading with vision and keep growing your firm.